Is knowledge just for the privileged, or for those brave enough to reach for it? The professor's voice echoed across the vaulted lecture hall of Harvard University, bouncing off mahogany-paneled walls and high-arched ceilings. His words weren't ordinary. They were a challenge, a provocation. Hundreds of students leaned forward, notebooks open, laptops glowing, pens tapping nervously, but no one dared to answer. Professor Whitaker, Harvard's most feared intellectual, stood at the center like a judge in a courtroom. He was tall, gray-haired, his rimless glasses glinting under the chandelier light. His sharp blue eyes sweeping over rows of students in designer clothes, young men and women who had been raised in privilege, molded for this very place. In front of him, written boldly across the massive blackboard, was a problem. Numbers sprawled like a puzzle from another world, symbols twisting into riddles even the most brilliant minds in the room couldn't untangle. It wasn't from a textbook. This was Whitaker's signature move. Every semester he dropped an unsolvable question in the opening lecture of advanced theoretical mathematics. A test of courage. A test of mind. A test of who belonged at Harvard and who didn't. "Come now," Whitaker prodded, his voice both calm and cutting. "Surely among you, the best this generation has to offer, there is someone willing to attempt it." Silence. The students shifted uneasily. A boy in the front row, Brooks Harrington III, grandson of a senator, son of a Wall Street titan, adjusted his Rolex and smirked. He whispered something to the girl beside him, and they both stifled a laugh. "Not even a guess?" the professor pressed, walking slowly, his shoes clicking against polished wood. "Are you also afraid of being wrong?" The tension thickened. Pens hovered uselessly. One student closed his laptop, embarrassed. Another pretended to reread notes she hadn't taken, and in the third row near the aisle sat a girl almost invisible. Her name was Amara Johnson, 18 years old, a freshman, the daughter of a single mother who worked as a maid in downtown Boston. Her gray cardigan had been thrifted, her jeans faded at the knees, and her sneakers bore scuffs from endless bus rides. While the others carried leather satchels and MacBooks, she carried a worn spiral notebook and a pen she had borrowed from the library. She was there because of a scholarship, a full ride. She had been told more than once that she didn't belong, that Harvard was a place for legacies, not for girls who studied under street lamps when the power was cut at home. But Amara sat with her back straight, her eyes not on her notes, but on the board. She wasn't frowning like the others. She was thinking. Professor Whitaker stopped near her row, scanning the faces, pausing just long enough for Amara to lower her gaze. She didn't want attention. "Not yet. Let me be clear," he said, his voice dropping into a dangerous whisper that somehow carried across the entire room. "If you cannot even attempt to think, then you are wasting your time. And worse, you are wasting mine." The words stung. Brooks chuckled, as if they were aimed at everyone else. Still, no one raised their hand. The professor sighed, turning back to the board. "I expected more courage from Harvard's best." And then from the back, a voice rang out. "Professor, may I try?" The room froze. All heads turned toward the source. It wasn't Brooks or his laughing companion. It wasn't any of the polished prodigies with names etched into prep school trophies. It was Amara. Her voice was steady, though her heart pounded. She could feel eyes on her, dozens of them, piercing, skeptical, amused. Professor Whitaker turned slowly, one eyebrow arching. "Your name?" "Amara Johnson, sir," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Murmurs erupted instantly. "Johnson, who's that? A scholarship kid? Where did she even come from?" Brooks smirked, leaning back in his chair. "This should be good," he muttered loudly enough for the rows around him to hear. Whitaker studied her for a long moment. His eyes narrowed, not unkindly, but as though weighing her against some invisible scale. "Very well, Miss Johnson," he said at last, stepping aside and motioning to the board. "Show us if courage is matched by competence." The class held its breath. Amara rose slowly, her sneakers squeaking softly as she walked down the aisle toward the board. She reached the board and picked up the chalk. It felt heavier than it should. Behind her, whispers slithered through the hall. "Who does she think she is? She's going to embarrass herself." Probably memorized a trick or something. Amara lifted the chalk. The board loomed, the impossible problem stretching wide before her. She glanced briefly at Professor Whitaker. He gave nothing away. Just a blank, expectant stare. Then she turned back and began. The room was silent except for the soft scratch of chalk. Symbols bloomed across the black surface as Amara worked, her movements deliberate, her focus absolute. She didn't rush. She didn't falter. Every number, every variable, every line was laid down with care. The students leaned forward, curiosity overtaking arrogance. Brooks squinted, frowning now. This wasn't random scribbling. She was actually doing something. 5 minutes passed. 10. Amara filled half the board, her spiral notebook open beside her for reference. She paused only to push a stray curl back into her bun, her expression calm. Unshaken, Professor Whitaker's lips twitched almost imperceptibly. Finally, Amara set the chalk down. She stepped back, her chest rising and falling quickly. Though her face betrayed nothing but quiet confidence, the blackboard was no longer chaos. It was a path. A solution in progress. The class erupted in whispers. Wait, she connected the variables. That actually makes sense. No way. Did she just... Professor Whitaker raised his hand, and the room silenced instantly. He studied the board, his eyes scanning line by line, calculation by calculation. His fingers tapped against his chin. At last, he turned back to the class. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said slowly, "Miss Johnson has not solved the problem." A ripple of smug relief passed through the elite students. Brooks even chuckled. But she is the first in 15 years to even understand where to begin. The relief evaporated. The class went dead silent. Whitaker's eyes glittered behind his glasses as he looked at Amara. "Miss Johnson, you may sit." Her heart thundered. She nodded once, quietly, and walked back to her seat. The whispers followed her, but they had changed. No longer mocking, now they were curious. She sank into her chair, clutching her notebook, trying not to smile. Whitaker turned back to the rest of the class, his voice cold as ice. "Let this be a lesson," he said. "Harvard is not impressed by money, by names, or by the illusion of intelligence. Harvard is impressed by thought. And today none of you thought, except her." Dozens of privileged faces flushed red. Brooks looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Whitaker erased the board with one swift motion. Class dismissed. Chairs scraped. Students gathered their things in stunned silence. Amara stayed seated, her pulse still racing, the chalk dust clinging faintly to her fingers. As the hall emptied, Brooks walked past her row. He paused, sneering down at her. "Don't get comfortable, Johnson," he muttered. "One stunt doesn't make you Harvard material." Amara met his gaze. For the first time, she didn't flinch. "Neither does a last name," she replied quietly. His smirk faltered. He walked off without another word. Professor Whitaker closed his briefcase at the front, glancing once more in her direction. Their eyes met briefly. For a fleeting second, Amara thought she saw the faintest curve of a smile. Then he turned and left. Amara sat alone for a moment, the vast lecture hall empty now, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on her. She had raised her hand. She had dared. And for the first time since arriving at Harvard, she felt like she belonged. She didn't know then that this moment, the question no one could answer, the silence she had broken, was only the beginning. Because what lay ahead would shake not just her classmates, but Harvard itself. Why do some doors open only for those born with keys? Her first week had been a blur. New faces, new classes, whispers that clung to her like shadows. But today, something had shifted. She had stood at the board. She had dared. Yet she knew courage came with consequences. Inside Elliott House, the dorm common room buzzed with laughter. Rich mahogany furniture framed students lounging with mugs of coffee, laptops open, conversations spilling like wine. Brooks Harrington sat at the center, his friends gathered like courtiers. His suit jacket lay draped across the couch, his tie loosened. He scrolled on his phone, smirking. "Did you see her?" one of the boys asked. "Up there like she belonged?" Pathetic, a girl chimed in, twirling her pearl earring. She'll wash out by midterms. They always do. Brooks leaned back, eyes gleaming. Johnson's got guts, I'll give her that. But guts don't last here. Connections do? They laughed. Brooks tapped a message into his phone, the glow lighting his sharp features. Let's see how long our scholarship girl survives the fire. Amara, meanwhile, sat cross-legged on her dorm bed, the room dim except for a desk lamp. Her roommate Lila typed furiously on her laptop, earbuds in, oblivious. Amara flipped through her notebook, her fingers brushing over equations, scribbles, half-solved puzzles. Numbers had always been her sanctuary, her escape from the noise of the world, but tonight the noise wouldn't fade. She replayed every look from class, every whisper, every sneer. She thought of Brooks's warning, "Don't get comfortable." Her mother's voice came back to her, soft but firm, the way it always did in hard moments. "Amara, when the world tells you no, you don't listen. You find another way." She closed her notebook with a snap. Another way. That's what she needed. 2 days later, she found herself outside the office of Professor Whitaker. The hallway smelled of old books and chalk dust, portraits of past scholars staring down at her. She hesitated, clutching her bag strap, her breath shallow. Finally, she knocked. "Enter," came the deep voice inside. The office was lined wall to wall with books, the air thick with paper and ink. Whitaker sat at his desk, spectacles perched low, scribbling notes with an old fountain pen. He didn't look up at first. "Miss Johnson," he said, as though expecting her. "Close the door." She obeyed, her heart racing. He set his pen down, folding his hands. "You surprised me." Amara shifted nervously. I wasn't trying to." His lips twitched. "Precisely why you did." A silence stretched. The tick of the old clock on his shelf filled the space. Finally, she asked, "Did I really understand it?" He leaned back, studying her with piercing eyes. "You saw the path. Most never see it, even after years. That is not luck. That is vision." Amara swallowed hard. Praise felt strange, like stepping into shoes too big for her. "Then why didn't you let me finish?" "Because," he said, standing and moving toward the window, "the test wasn't about the solution. It was about the will to try," she frowned. "So, it was a trick?" Whitaker turned sharply, his gaze like a blade. "Life is a trick, Miss Johnson." Harvard doubly so. Her chest tightened. She had thought coming here would be freedom, the promised land. Now, standing in this office, she realized it was a battlefield. Whitaker's tone softened, just barely. "You have potential." "But potential makes enemies." The words struck deep. She thought of Brooks's glare, the whispers in the dorms. "They already hate me." "Good," Whitaker said. "It means you're doing something right." He handed her a stack of papers, dense, complex problems she had never seen before. "Solve these. Not for a grade, for yourself. Bring them back in a week." Amara took them, her hands trembling. "Why me?" "Because," he said, turning back to his desk, "you're the only one who asked the right question." That night, Amara worked until her eyes burned. She spread the papers across her desk, scribbling late into the night, her lamp the only light in the dark dorm. Lila had long since gone to bed, muttering about her crazy roommate. Every line she solved pulled her deeper. It wasn't just math. It was a language, a story. Patterns hidden in chaos, truths disguised as riddles. She felt alive, every neuron firing, every number singing, but not everyone celebrated her diligence. Brooks sat in a leather chair across from his father in their Beacon Hill townhouse, whiskey glasses clinking between them. The elder Harrington, silver-haired and sharp-jawed, was more intimidating than any professor. "She embarrassed me, Father," Brooks muttered. "In front of everyone!" His father swirled the amber liquid, smirking. "Then make sure she doesn't again." "How?" "Use what we've always used. Influence, fear, control. Harvard runs on tradition, son." "And tradition does not bend for girls like her." Brooks's jaw tightened. "Consider it handled." Days passed. Amara grew bolder in class, her hand rising more often, her voice steadier. Whitaker began to call on her deliberately, forcing the room to hear her. Some students grudgingly respected her. Others seethed. One evening, as she left the library, her notebook tucked under her arm, she felt eyes on her. She turned, nothing. Just the dim lamplight, the shadows stretching across cobblestones. She walked faster. Behind her, footsteps echoed. She clutched her bag tighter, her breath quickening. She turned a corner, heart racing, until... "Miss Johnson!" She spun. It was Brooks, but he wasn't alone. Two of his friends flanked him, smirks curling their lips. "What do you want?" she asked, trying to steady her voice. Brooks stepped closer, his cologne sharp in the cold night. "You think you're clever, don't you? Standing up in class, making us look small." "I didn't make you look small," she said quietly. "You did that yourself." His smile faded. He grabbed her notebook from her arm, flipping it open. Pages filled with calculations, thoughts, ideas. This is cute," he sneered, tossing it to the ground. "But it won't save you here." Amara bent quickly, scooping it up, clutching it to her chest. "Leave me alone." Brooks leaned in, his whisper venomous. "Remember, Johnson, Harvard eats the weak. And you? You're already starving." With that, he and his friends walked off, their laughter echoing. Amara stood frozen, tears stinging her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She looked down at her notebook, at the smudged chalk dust still on its cover. "They won't break me," she thought. Not here. Not ever. The week ended with her back in Whitaker's office. She handed him the completed problems, her heart pounding. He read in silence, his eyes scanning, his brow furrowing, then lifting. When he finished, he set them down carefully. "You did more than solve them," he said. "You saw what they meant," Amara blinked. "What do they mean?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "They're part of something larger. A project. Something not everyone at Harvard is ready for." Her breath caught. "Why give them to me?" "Because you're not like them," Whitaker said. "And that may be the very thing that saves you." A chill ran down her spine. Outside his office, Brooks lingered in the hallway, listening through the door, his fists tightening. That night, as the autumn wind howled through the yard, Amara lay awake in her dorm bed, staring at the ceiling. She didn't know what frightened her more, Brooks's threats or Whitaker's secrets. All she knew was this: Harvard was no longer just a school. It was a game, a dangerous one, and she had just been dealt into it. What if the people we trust to teach us are the same ones hiding the greatest lies? The question slipped out of Amara's mouth before she could stop herself. She was alone in the library, whispering to her reflection in the darkened window. The glass showed her tired face, her red-rimmed eyes, the outline of the yard glowing under streetlights behind her. It had been weeks since Professor Whitaker handed her the first stack of problems. Weeks of nights spent at her desk, chasing numbers into riddles, riddles into truths. What she found wasn't just mathematics. It was a pattern, a map, a code. But a code to what? The answer began to unfold one evening in Whitaker's office. He shut the door behind her, sliding the bolt, his face grim. "They'll know soon," he muttered. Amara clutched her notebook tighter. "Know what?" Whitaker pressed a folder into her hands. She hesitated before opening it. Inside were financial records, cryptic diagrams, and stamped pages marked confidential. Her eyes widened. This isn't math. "It's power," he said. "The equations were a cover. You cracked them because you weren't meant to belong here. You didn't see privilege, you saw truth." She looked at him, horrified. "What is this?" "Some kind of a deal," Whitaker cut in. $500 million. Hidden through scholarships, research grants, fake charities. It was supposed to stay buried. Her throat went dry. "And Brooks?" Whitaker's eyes hardened. "His family is at the center of it." The room felt colder. Her rival wasn't just a spoiled heir. He was tied to the heart of something bigger, darker. "Why are you showing me this?" she whispered. "Because," Whitaker said, lowering his voice, "someone has to expose it. And I can't do it alone." Amara staggered back to her dorm in a daze. Lila sat cross-legged on her bed, scrolling through her phone. "You okay?" she asked without looking up. "Yeah," Amara lied, stuffing the folder into her bag. But that night she barely slept. Every creak of the dorm, every shadow in the hallway made her flinch. She dreamed of equations that bled into dollar signs, of Brooks's smirk turning into a mask. The pressure came fast. First, whispers in the hallways. Students who had once ignored her now stared openly. She overheard her name in conversations laced with disdain. Then came the threats. An anonymous note slipped under her door. "Leave it alone, or leave Harvard." Amara's hands shook as she held the paper. But instead of fear, fire rose in her chest. If they think they can scare me out, they don't know me at all. One afternoon, Brooks cornered her outside Sanders Theater. His tie was perfectly knotted, his smile cold. "You've been spending a lot of time with Whitaker," he said smoothly. She froze, forcing calm into her voice. So? He leaned closer. "Careful, Johnson. Curiosity kills, especially for girls like you." She met his eyes, steady. "Funny. Curiosity makes me stronger." His smile faltered for just a moment before he walked away, his shoes clicking on the pavement. The breakthrough came late one night in the library. Amara had spread the documents across a table, her pen scratching furiously. A security guard passed by, glancing at her suspiciously, but she ignored him. And then it clicked. She traced the numbers, her pulse quickening. The money wasn't just hidden. It was laundered through overseas accounts, shell companies with names that disguised their origin. And one name surfaced again and again: Harrington Global. Her breath caught. It's his family. Brooks's father. Maybe even Brooks himself. The next morning, she went straight to Whitaker's office, the folder clutched tight. But when she arrived, the door was ajar. "Professor," she called softly. No answer. She pushed the door open. Papers scattered the floor, books toppled, the faint smell of whiskey in the air. The desk drawer hung open, empty. Her stomach dropped. He was gone. Footsteps echoed in the hall. Amara spun, heart racing. A shadow loomed. "Brooks, looking for your mentor?" His voice dripped with mockery. "Funny thing. He vanished. Maybe he realized some games are too dangerous to play." Her hands tightened on the folder. "You did this." He stepped closer, smirking. "Be careful what you accuse me of, Johnson. People disappear for less." Before she could respond, he leaned in, whispering in her ear, "Drop it, or I'll make sure you regret ever stepping foot on this campus." Then he walked away, leaving her shaking in the wrecked office. But Amara didn't drop it. She couldn't. The next week, the tension grew unbearable. She avoided Brooks, but his presence followed her everywhere. His friends stared her down in the dining hall. Her professors spoke to her cautiously, as if warned. Still, she worked in secret. She photocopied documents, hid notes under her mattress, encrypted files on her laptop, and slowly, she began to connect with others. Lila noticed her stress and pressed until Amara confessed part of the truth. Instead of recoiling, Lila's eyes lit up. "Then let's take them down," she whispered. Another ally emerged in James, a quiet student from her math class. He had overheard enough to know she was onto something big. When she showed him a piece of the puzzle, his jaw dropped. This could destroy families," he said. "Good," Amara answered. The climax came at a Harvard gala. The great hall was dripping with chandeliers and golden light, tables lined with crystal glasses, professors and donors mingling in tailored suits. Amara stood near the back, her red dress simple but striking. Her notebook was tucked in her clutch, her hands trembling. At the front, Mr. Harrington, Brooks's father, raised a glass, his voice booming. "To legacy, to tradition, to Harvard." The crowd cheered. Amara's pulse thundered. She glanced at Lila and James, both giving her small nods. She stepped forward. Her voice, though small at first, cut through the noise. "What about the truth?" The room fell silent. Heads turned. Brooks stiffened at his table. His father's smile froze. Amara's hands shook, but she held up the folder. $500 million, laundered through fake charities, hidden in plain sight. All under the Harrington name, gasps rippled through the hall. Cameras flashed. Professors whispered furiously. Mr. Harrington's face darkened. "Young lady, you don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Amara replied, her voice gaining strength. And I have the proof. She opened the folder, revealing the documents, the trail of accounts, the hidden signatures. The room erupted. Brooks leapt to his feet.
She's lying!
She's just a scholarship girl desperate for attention. But his voice was drowned out by the uproar. Reporters scribbled furiously. Professors shouted. Security moved in, and through it all, Amara stood tall, her notebook clutched like a shield, her eyes blazing. The aftermath was chaos. Investigations launched within days. The Harrington name splashed across headlines. Brooks vanished from campus. His father denied everything, but the documents spoke louder than words. Amara was called brave, reckless, a hero, a fool, but none of it mattered. For the first time, she felt free. Weeks later, she sat alone on the steps of Widener Library, the winter wind biting her cheeks. She thought of her mother, of the sacrifices that brought her here. She thought of Whitaker, vanished, but not forgotten. She thought of Brooks and the empire of lies she had helped unravel. Lila appeared, handing her a steaming cup of coffee. "So," she said with a grin, "what's next?" Amara smiled faintly, the first real smile in weeks. "Whatever door they try to close next, I'll find another way through." She sipped the coffee, staring out at the snow-dusted yard, the bells of Harvard ringing in the distance. The fight wasn't over. It never would be. But Amara had already learned the truth. Harvard wasn't paradise. It wasn't freedom, it was a battlefield, and she had won her first war.